Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni muli wanji, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jed Lee, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so honored and so very, very happy that you're joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show. Tell your kids' teachers, their librarians, their guidance counselors, their principal. And please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Good Pods, Podcast Addict, wherever you find your podcasts. Our guest today is Jessica Spear. She is here to celebrate the phone book. Before we say hello and welcome Jessica back to the Reading with Your Kids studios, we need to say goodbye to an old friend, Stitcher Radio. Stitcher Radio has been serving the podcast community for over 15 years, and it will cease to be in existence on August 29, 2023. If you are subscribing to the Reading with Your Kids podcast on Stitcher Radio, you're going to have to find a new home base. We, of course, love the iHeartRadio app. We love Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Audible, Ghana, Himalaya, Good Pods, Podcast Addict. We love all of the podcasting apps that carry the Reading with Your Kids podcast. So please find yourself a brand new favorite podcasting app, and please be sure to subscribe to the Reading with Your Kids podcast. And please be sure to thank all the folks at Stitcher Radio for what they've done for podcasting over the last 15 years. We're going to miss you, Stitcher. Join us right now from the beautiful state of Colorado. Our guest is returning to the show today to talk about something that maybe a lot of people don't even know what it is. The name of the new book is The Phone Book. Please welcome back Jessica Spear. Hey, Jessica, how are you?
Hey, Jedley, I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me back.
I'm delighted to have you back. We always talk about really important topics to help our kids kind of develop healthy relationships. And the phone book is in that vein. We're going to be talking to kids, again, like I said, about something that they might not be aware of. Tell us a little bit more about the phone book, please.
Sure. Well, I was inspired to write this one when the pandemic hit and we were all getting sucked into our screens and devices, and the age at which kids starting to get a connected device, our phone was getting earlier and earlier. And as a mom, but also as a social scientist, that really kind of piqued my curiosity. There's a lot to talk about with that. So I dove into research and, all the things I had preteens at that point too. All the things I wanted to make sure my kids understood about, having a connected device went into that book. So I come up with really long titles. So here you go. It's called The Phone Book. And the subtitle is Stay Safe, Be Smart, and Make the World Better with the Powerful Device in Your Hand. And just like my other books, I know it needs to be fun because, hey, I'm competing with phones. So this book, like my other books, has quizzes and activities and lots of little true stories and secret codes and just ways to engage kids in a way that is entertaining, but also really talks about some important stuff for phone safety and being a digital citizen.
I think it is so vital that we have these conversations with our kids as early as possible. Because as you said, kids are getting their devices earlier and earlier. And if somebody had told me when I was in middle school that one day I'd be walking around with this little rectangular device in my pocket that would give me the ability to create videos and audios and send messages around the world in the blink of an eye at no cost, I wouldn't have believed them. The thing that I think that parents, and I think as parents, we're all aware of that, but I don't think that we're aware enough of the fact that in addition to all those things, in addition to the phone being a gateway for our kids to interact with the world, it's also a gateway for the world to interact with our kids. And we would never leave a door to the outside world open and unmonitored to our kids' bedrooms. But that's actually what we're doing when we're giving them the phone. All sorts of folks, and lots of them not so nice, have access to our kids via that phone.
Yeah, in fact, that's one of the chapters. It's called Creepy People Online, because we have to talk about that. And I wish we didn't. I wish we were in a world where we didn't have to talk about that, but we do, especially if, our kid's phone or iPad or whatever is connected directly to the internet, or they're on any sort of social media, and even gaming apps sometimes that, you're chatting with others. So there are people out there that do not have their best interests in mind. So talking about that in an age-appropriate way, but, also learning that we can do things to protect our privacy online too. And sometimes, kids know far more than we do as adults on technology. So we as parents might not be super equipped to understand how to make that, platform private for our children. We have to kind of dig in and learn that. So this book goes into that. At the end of every chapter, there's a little checklist. And so, talking on the Creepy People Online chapter, the checklist is like, if you're on social media, be sure to keep those private. Be sure to keep not your real name, use a nickname, don't post your address, don't answer these type of questions when people ask you these questions online. So all those things, all those conversations we want to have with kids, are covered in this book.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a funny coincidence that a creepy person just contacted me on Twitter this morning, asking me to help them, get some gift cards for someone, that whole scam. And I remember when my son, who's now 30, something happened to the first phone we gave him. We went in to get him a new phone, and the person behind the counter was really excited. He goes, this, connects your kid directly to the internet. It's a smartphone. And I said, I don't want that. And basically, I didn't have an option. There was no non-smartphone to give my kid at the time. It was like everything. And I really have to pat myself on the back because I didn't lose my temper as much as I wanted to, because here I am talking to the salesperson, and he's like, "Oh, of course, everybody wants to be connected to it. What's wrong with it?" And I'm like, I don't want this for my kid. And what's wrong with you not understanding that this poses a danger to my kid?
Yeah. And not, if they don't have young kids, they might not think of those things. Like, a search on a misspelled word could pop up some really explicit and unfortunate things for our kids online. So, when parents ask me, what age should their kids, get a phone, I always encourage them to, delay as much as possible. And when you do start really small. Like they don't have to be connected to the internet, or it can be very locked down. They can start really small. Maybe they are just having texting and a couple of games or something really small, and as they're growing and as you're having tons of these conversations at home about, how to be safe online, how to be a digital citizen, slowly opening up basically this window to the world. But we want to take that slow because it's a lot for little kids.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to share real quick. I think I shared this on the podcast in the past. A lesson that both of my kids learned really early on. Because one of the things we want to teach our kids, of course, is that anything you post online is there forever. And I don't know if my kids really bought that, but when I first had a website built for me, and I had it built for me and spent a lot of money, the first picture that was on that website was me in my clown outfit with my two little kids. And my daughter was 4 at the time, and my son might have been 6. And after a few years, as the kids were getting into school and their friends were checking out my website and all of that, they said, "Hey, can you change that picture? We're not babies anymore." And I didn't. I actually went out and learned how to build a website, and we got rid of that picture. And then a few years later, as my kids, I think my son was getting into high school, I just did a Google search of my name, which is advisable for everybody to kind of do, see what people are saying about you online. And I found that picture. And I didn't have it on my computer. And it wasn't on my website. And so I sat down with my kids and I said, look, I did what you asked. I took that picture off my website. I don't have it. I don't even know where this is. I said, but it's still out there online. I said, there's nothing I can do about that. And it was a really, boom, it was like I just got kind of a dope slap to both of them, like going, oh, maybe we should listen to all these lessons. And thankfully, they have.
Yeah, and that's such a great topic. That's another chapter. It's called Your Digital Footprint, aka your digital reputation, because believe it or not, colleges actually search, applicants as they're applying to schools, because they can quickly get a sense of who this person is. And for the most part, what they find is actually really positive. In most cases, they're seeing, some really positive things students are sharing about themselves. But there have absolutely been cases where some universities have pulled back their acceptance because of things they've seen their students post online. And this is a really tough concept. If you're only 12 or 11, you're not thinking about that, or college. So, but, it's really important to keep talking about this. And so one of the activities for this in the book is, it's an activity called You Be the Judge. And, the activity is the reader is, in charge of hiring a person to work in their ice cream shop, and they go do a quick, social media check on these people. And, there's 3 pictures of person 1 and there's 3 pictures of person 2. And, one of those persons has, some graffiti and maybe some violence and some things that, somebody could question their character on. The other one, shows a lot of really positive things, accomplishments and, volunteer work. And, so the reader gets to choose which one would you hire? So we hate to judge a book by the cover, but it's happening all the time. It's happening all the time, and employers and colleges are using this. So kids do need to start to think about it. And of course, mistakes are going to happen, because they're kids, and, their prefrontal cortex isn't totally formed, so they don't have self-control in some of these areas yet. But just keeping the conversation going, having them try to pause and think about, is this how I want to show myself online? Is this what I want to share about myself?
Yeah. So what do you say to the kid? I mean, I think that's a great exercise and great activity to give, put the power in the kid's hand. You make the choice. Who would you rather hire? But what are you going to say as a parent to the kid who comes back at you and says, but that's not fair. Mm-hmm. That's not fair. They shouldn't be judging me on that. That's not fair.
Yeah.
And they're right.
I guess.
But
yeah. And I would say you are right. That is not fair. It's one of those things in life that happens, that we do sometimes judge each other at a surface level without knowing each other deeply. And our minds do that almost instantaneously. It's an old survival instinct that we do this. So knowing, yes, it doesn't feel fair, but it happens, but, one of our superpowers with our phones and our devices is we get to choose what we post online. So that you have that power within you to choose what you're sharing about yourself online.
Yeah. You mentioned digital citizen a couple of times. I'm imagining, in addition to talking to our kids about keeping themselves safe from others, keeping themselves safe from themselves, posting something that might hurt them later on, that being a digital citizen means that they have to also be careful of how they might affect others with the way they post.
Yeah. And this is a tricky one because in many ways, the social lives, once we get especially to the preteen and the early teens and teen years, social lives are playing out online. They're playing out in group chats. They're playing out in DMs and on social media. So there's a lot of conversations happening online, and sometimes they get really messy and mean. So there's a new term called digital drama, which is not cyberbullying. Cyberbullying is a different deal. Digital drama is more or less arguments, misunderstandings, things playing out online between, kids and teens and even adults sometimes. And it could get really ugly. So again, getting back to how can we navigate this situation, putting, our best foot forward, and sometimes it is like, hey, let's, put a pause on this and let's try to talk face to face, or you see two other people really going at each other online, say, hey guys, let's let's stop. So just really being aware of it's hard because, these arguments and digital drama is playing out very publicly, so there's peers watching, people are getting involved. It's very complicated. So one way to be a digital citizen is just to navigate that with as much kindness as they can, and step out when they need to, or try to encourage others to, hey guys, time to stop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is a tough one. And I've had a couple of conversations with folks because, as I mentioned earlier, this rectangular thing in our pocket gives us the power to send pictures that we create around the world. It also gives us the power to send pictures that we might not want anybody else except for one particular person to see. And there are more and more, I'm trying to be as polite, as family friendly as possible. But, and there are more and more kids that are involved in sending these images, and they're becoming younger and younger. Mm-hmm. And I know at one time when phones were first getting into the hands of kids were actually getting arrested for, distributing pornographic images, even though it was of themselves. I think that most states have figured that out. I'm not quite sure, but what about that? How are we going to have those conversations with our kids?
Yeah, and that I have a story on that too, because this is so common, Jedley, and I visit a lot of middle schools, and I have to tell you that most middle schools, this is happening already. And so the story in the book is about, this very young couple, dating in quotes, which is middle school dating, which is not really anything except saying that you're in quotes dating. But one of these photos is shared between them, and then there's a breakup, and then the next thing you know, the photo is traveling around the school. And this for young girls, especially at this age, this is really devastating. This is hard for them to recover from, especially when it's happening in middle school. So I do talk about that, and I name what that is. It's still in many states, it is not legal, so often, when the school is resolving this, they might pull in the police. So that's in the story too. I just want kids to be armed with, this is really a possibility. So, the best we can do is just keep sharing that nothing we put out there online is private, really. Even a Snapchat where it apparently disappears. All kids know that they can just do a quick screenshot and they got that on Snapchat and it's theirs, and they can spread that, and even things they delete, you never know if somebody else's phone is backed up to the cloud, or it's like the picture you shared. You never know. So this is a must-have conversation. I'd hate to say this, even when we get into, the upper elementary years. It's because it's absolutely happening in middle school, and then, and even more so in high school.
Yeah. I've had these conversations and with different experts. And one of the responses I've gotten from somebody kind of surprised me. It's like going, hey, sexting, it's happening. It's, what are you going to do? And I'm like, not quite sure that's the attitude I would take.
Right. Yeah. And when it comes to older teens and young adults, it is definitely part of the culture. But where I draw a difference is in these younger kids, it is not at all their intention. It really is not. And it can be much more devastating to their self-esteem at that very early age. So I see what that person is saying, for an older audience, but when we're talking kids and preteens and early teens, they absolutely did not intend for that to go very, beyond the person they meant to send it to. And it does have a lot of social repercussions when that happens on them. It's really hard to recover for some kids. So it's important, for us as adults to arm them with as much information as we can so they can hopefully make some choices there, especially in those younger years.
Yeah. We've talked here on the podcast about how it is so much easier for kids to talk about issues when they're talking about the character in a book. You sit down and you ask your kid, hey, are you being bullied at school? You're not going to get anything. But if you're sitting down, you're reading a book about a bullying situation, you can talk about those issues, and maybe it either, if it doesn't trigger the kid to say, hey, this is happening to me or it's happening to my friend, it gives them the knowledge that they can then use to go and deal with the situation. I have a feeling the phone book is going to do that in the reverse. It's going to help parents have these conversations that they need to have with their kids. It's going to make it so much more easier for parents to have these conversations, because I know I wasn't looking forward to having these conversations with my kid, and I have a background in social work, so like I was talking to kids about stuff like this before I was married. I'm for a typical parent who has no background, it would be really intimidating, and I think the phone book is a great public service to those parents.
Well, I'm hoping so. I wanted it to be a framework, and I wrote it for kids because I think it's best sometimes when kids get the information directly to them, written in a way that is age appropriate for them. But it is a framework for families to have all these conversations, so I envision it as as kids are maybe getting to the age where they're getting a connected device or phone, that this comes first, and this is really, read together as slowly or as quickly as possible and talked through. And then later is a resource for when these things inevitably come up, because the things in this book are going to come up. It's hard to avoid all of these things. So they will happen. And so, families and kids can go back to this, oh my gosh, I'm stuck in some real digital drama here. They can go back to that and maybe look for some ways to navigate that situation.
Yeah. I kind of wish that we could, and there's no way to do this, but I kind of wish that before the technology is available to kids, that we have a book like the phone book available for parents, so we can help our kids figure this stuff out before they actually have. We wouldn't give a kid a chainsaw without instructions.
I know. You know what is so, in fact, there's the opening of the book talks about all these, innovations that hit the market, and then later we're like, oops, for instance, cars. So in the late 1800s, this amazing innovation, cars, it wasn't until 1968 with much resistance did, New York finally make it a law to have children seatbelted. So we went from the late 1800s to 1968 with no protections for children. So my hope is that we're going to get there. In fact, that was one thing that I thought was really inspiring. As I was researching this book, there is a lot happening. I listened in on some Senate hearings, and there's lots of organizations. So there's things bubbling up. We know we need to put some guardrails in place. Right now, tech is one of the only industries that is not regulated, and it is having a negative impact on our kids. But there's a lot of things bubbling up that haven't passed yet. I'm surprised. I thought we were really close this last time, but it didn't get through. But I'm hoping there will be guardrails in place. We need some decent age verification. We can do that. We have the technology now to verify, to keep kids off really explicit and violent sites. We need to think about, many of these platforms weren't actually designed for kids. There's tons of kids on them, but they were not designed for kids. So we need to kind of relook at that. Okay, how would this actually work? If we knew that 10 million kids are on this, how would we actually design this instead of, retroactively trying to fit that? So I'm hopeful that we're getting there, but, in typical fashion, we're getting there pretty slowly, and, tech is moving much faster than we are.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many. I had an experience where I was at a school, and I did a very unscientific poll, and before my presentation, I was talking to a teacher, and the teacher said, none of these kids are online. You don't have to worry about that at all. And I just thought, what the, because I'm a bit of a troublemaker. I just asked the kids, hey, how many of you guys have a phone? And everybody's hands went up. And this is a group from K to 5. Yeah. And I said, how many of you guys are on social media? And 60% of the hands went up. And you heard the teacher's jaws drop and hit the floor. I mean, it was, and I felt like saying, why are you guys surprised?
Yes. Oh, yeah. In 2011, over half of 11-year-olds had a smartphone, and now we're around 2023. So I'm assuming it's more than that now. Yeah. And so, and you're right. That poll is really close. They say that over 40% of preteens are on social media too. So and this is probably a little behind. So what you saw is absolutely true. And by middle school, it's just kind of, the parents that are trying to delay it as much as possible, that becomes a really tough battle in middle school, because that's how kids, they are communicating. Yeah. That's their primary communication channel. They're DMing or they're texting. And there's I don't want to sound all negative. I actually love technology. There's some real positives there. But there's also some negatives that, are not great. And the Surgeon General just released this warning about social media, recently. So, that was, some acknowledgement that, hey, we're not actually sure this is safe, especially for preteens and especially for preteen girls. So we're getting there. We're getting there. We're getting, more information in parents' hands. But right now, the responsibility falls to parents. And that is hard for parents. I wish parents had some other people, and organizations and regulations that had their back. Because right now it is like parents trying to navigate this as best they can with their families.
Yeah. Hey, one last thing. One of the kind of concepts that I shared with my kids, and I don't know how successful I was, and it's been a long time, but this idea, and I think it's important for everybody to understand, when you're using something for free, you're the product. What's the best way to kind of get that across to kids?
Yeah, and in fact, that's where I start. Chapter 1 is called "Why Tech Companies Want You Staring at Your Screen." Because kids, actually, once they know this, they actually love this knowledge. Nobody likes to be duped. So the first part of the book talks about the tech business model, which is all about advertising. And, kids will relate to knowing that they look at something, mysteriously they start seeing ads for these things, popping up all over the place, so we can talk about advertising. We could talk about privacy there, data privacy, algorithms, just how algorithms work and how they're designed to keep us scrolling, and, explains why it is hard to pull away. The persuasive design techniques that are used to build smart technologies are super addictive. That's the whole point. So arming kids with this information makes them much more informed consumers. And at home, we can have a lot of these conversations about this thing, just about all these things, just noticing like, whoa, oh my gosh, I just ended up in a rabbit hole of scrolling, and, just acknowledging within ourselves as parents what we're experiencing online out loud with our kids will help them start to recognize that in their own online experiences too.
Absolutely. Hey, back in the day when I was growing up, having a phone book in your home was absolutely essential. And those were like really thick, and, but these days those aren't around anymore. But I believe that having The Phone Book by Jessica Spear is pretty essential to have in your home today. Jessica, where can people go to find out more about The Phone Book and that long subtitle, and also find out more about you?
The easiest place is my website, which is Jessica Spear, SPEER.com, and that has all about this book, my other books, and lots of articles and resources on this topic, and links off to all my socials. The book is available anywhere books are sold. So it's pretty easy to get a hold of. But thank you so much for chatting with me about this, Deadly. I sure appreciate you focusing on this topic.
Well, it's essential. It's really, really important, and I can't stress to parents enough. Your kids are in danger. That phone that you're giving your kids that are going to that you want your kids to have so you can help keep them safe by being connected with them, it also poses a danger unless you have these conversations with your kids. And so, Jessica, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast, and we hope you will join us for the next exciting episode of the show. Until then, we want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we want to start by thanking our guest, Jessica Spear. Please be sure to check out The Phone Book. We love having Jessica on the podcast. She always shares some really great and relevant information that our kids need and that we need to talk about with our kids. So thanks so much for being with us again, Jessica. Also want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Madison Dieris, Soji Franklin, Ann O'Leary, Monica Rivera Sosa. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me, but most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.